The evidence pointing to the God of the Bible is so compelling that it begs the question, why are so many scientists still atheists? Let's return to the cosmological argument for God's existence. Premise 1, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Premise 2, the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. How do atheists respond to this rock-solid argument, which is backed by mathematical and scientific evidence? The formal logic of the argument is sound, so to preserve the atheistic dogma, they must attack the two premises. Now, when they attack premise 1, everything that begins to exist has a cause, they attack reason itself. The law of causality, or cause and effect, is the founding principle of formal logic. In fact, science itself amounts to a search for cause and effect relationships. Or they can choose to attack premise 2, the universe began to exist, which is to attack the very best scientific evidence that we have. Astronomer Robert Jastrow, who is a professing agnostic, explains in his book God and the Astronomers. Theologians generally are delighted with the proof that the universe had a beginning, but astronomers are curiously upset. Their reactions provide an interesting demonstration of the response of the scientific mind. Supposedly, a very objective mind. When evidence uncovered by science itself leads to a conflict with the articles of faith in our profession. It turns out that the scientist behaves the way the rest of us do when our beliefs are in conflict with the evidence. We become irritated. We pretend the conflict does not exist. Or we paper it over with meaningless phrases. Note the articles of faith that Jastrow mentions. Now, everyone knows that theists have religious beliefs, but what's often overlooked is that atheistic scientists also have religious beliefs. The modern atheist portrays himself as a defender of logic and science against the religious superstitions. Yet, quite astonishingly, he turns against his own professed attributes in order to preserve his faith in atheism. This is not following the evidence where it leads. It is pure vanity. It is a curious sort of mutiny, atheism at the expense of reason and science. It is rather like a mother wolf that eats her young. First, let's take a look at the devices used by atheist apologists in their war against reason. When the atheist attacks the law of causality, he undermines all logical discourse and scientific inquiry. Science is a search for causes. If the atheist succeeds in his mission to undermine premise 1, the collateral damage will destroy science itself. Curiously, they attempt to use science in destroying the possibility of science by appealing to quantum physics. Specifically, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. German physicist Werner Heisenberg formulated the uncertainty principle while working at the Institute of Copenhagen, while he was working on the mathematical foundations for quantum mechanics. Now, simply put, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle states that it is impossible to know both the exact position and the exact velocity of an object at the same time. However, the effect is so tiny that it's only noticeable on a subatomic scale. The atheist argument basically amounts to, if causality at the subatomic realm isn't necessary, then perhaps causality of the entire universe isn't necessary either. The best-selling author of 12 books, including Coming of Age in the Milky Way, for which he was awarded an American Institute of Physics Prize and a nomination for the Pulitzer Prize, Timothy Ferris, makes the observation regarding quantum indeterminacy. Quantum indeterminacy may have nothing to do with human will, but as a matter of philosophical taste, there are good reasons to celebrate the return of chance to the fundamental affairs of the world. He celebrates the return of chance? Now isn't this curious? Here he speaks of good reasons for celebrating the return of chance, not good reasons to actually believe in chance. I'm forced to conclude that the celebration is one of freedom from the strong scientific evidence pointing towards God. If one can force oneself to believe in the power of chance, then one has embraced irrationality and anything at all can be made true. As discussed previously, chance amounts to nothingness. It is not a cause of anything. When we speak of something like flipping a coin, we say we have a 50% chance of getting heads or tails. But no one in their right mind believes that a magical force called chance causes the coin to land on heads. Do they? If chance is really a cause, cows can fly. So basically, atheists are arguing that indeterminacy or uncertainty in the subatomic world amounts to effects that do not need causes. This is logically incoherent and completely fails. It is more of a word game or an argument from ignorance than a sound argument. It confuses causality and predictability. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle does not prove that the movement of electrons is uncaused. It only describes the inability of observers to predict their location and speed at any given time. The mere fact that we can't predict something does not mean that something has no cause. The second approach of the atheist apologist is to undermine premise 2. The universe began to exist. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in 1970, mathematician Roger Penrose and Stephen Hawking proved that space-time had an absolute beginning to 5 decimal places. When we say the universe had a beginning, this includes time itself. Time is the 4th dimension, which is why physicists speak in terms of the fabric of space-time. This sort of irrefutable mathematical evidence leaves the atheist in a very uncomfortable position. Quite frankly, it threatens their faith in atheism. Now, I might be accused of taking Hawking out of context when I quoted him earlier from his book A Brief History of Time, saying that it became more and more clear that the universe must have a beginning in time, because Hawking now attempts to distance himself from that conclusion. I didn't bother to address it earlier because I was discussing scientific evidence. His recent attempts are not scientific, but philosophical. Fortunately, true science is not governed by the emotional whims of atheists. A cause by definition precedes an effect. The cause of time is by definition supernatural and beyond the grasp of science. The best scientific answer is, we don't know. The best logical inference is God. To avoid this, Hawking invented a concept he calls imaginary time. Yes, you heard me correctly, imaginary time. This is because he knows and admits that it is a fact that real time had a beginning. So, in an attempt to explain away the beginning, one must leave real time in favor of imaginary time. Now, if one is willing to leave reality behind for the land of imagination, I suppose any theory you want to assert can be true. We might as well call Hawking's theories based on imaginary time bedtime stories for atheists. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. Does this verse hold up to examination? It absolutely does. And the words of today's top atheist scientists reveal it. Anthony Flew, the celebrated philosopher and former high priest of atheism, spectacularly changed his mind and shocked the world by renouncing his atheism. He said, "The argument for intelligent design is enormously stronger than when I first met it. It seems to me that the case for an Aristotelian God who has the characteristics of power and also intelligence is now much stronger than it ever was before. A change of mind which occurred because he followed the scientific evidence where it led him." Physicist Paul Davies, while officially an agnostic, has written in his book Superforce, "The laws of physics seem themselves to be a product of exceedingly ingenious design." He further testifies in his book Cosmic Blueprint, "There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems, though someone has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe, the impression of design is overwhelming." Now, most astonishingly, In his recent debate on the existence of God held at Oxford University, even the Deacon of Darwinism, Dick Dawkins, recently conceded to the mathematician John Lennox that a serious case can be made for a deistic God. This represents a vast departure from the atheist fundamentalist posturing he offered up in his pop culture fluff philosophical piece called The God Delusion. In light of his recent waffling, perhaps it should be retitled The God Confusion. I also suppose he must retract his earlier assertion that Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist, as modern cosmology has made atheism a tenuous position with no evidence to support it.